Today I'm going to share another little short story from the book True Christmas Stories from the Heart of Appalachia, compiled and edited by James M. Gifford, Judith F. Kidwell, and Wayne Ongst. The one I'm going to read today is 1945 is the date, Unexpected Riches. G. Sam Pite. That's who wrote it. It was Christmas 1945 and I was 12 years old. And Christmas has a power of changing our outlook on things. It happened at midday of Christmas Eve. I was madly in love with the little girl who lived down the street from us. I lived from day to day just scheming up ways to impress her. The gift I wanted to get for her was in a dusty showcase in Davis and Harvey's general store. And it was going to stay there because I didn't have a dime. I had delivered the Portsmouth Times along the steep hillsides of South Portsmouth, but what little money I had managed to save from the paper route, I had soon squandered on riotous living. Saturday matinees, BBs, comic books, ice cream, and candy, all spent on myself except for a few treats for the boys at the playhouse next door to the Garden Theater. My big brother Booty pulled off a surprise when he got home on leave from the Navy about noon on the day before Christmas. One of his old school chums had picked him up at the bus station, and he walked in the door in full dress blues, toting his sea bag over one shoulder. My mother went wild. Little sister Linda hugged his legs. The Christmas tree in the corner of the living room didn't have electric lights, but it seemed to be fairly glowing. The family circle was complete. There would be presents to open the next morning and a big Christmas dinner later in the day. My brother hadn't even changed out of his uniform before he called me aside. "Hold out your hands," he said. I did. "Shut your eyes," he said. I did. He filled my hands with more silver coins than I had ever seen together at one time. I was so excited that I didn't even take time to thank him. I ran up the stairs, holding the money out in front of me, to my room, the room I would share again with him for the next few days. I jumped up in the middle of the bed and spilled the money out on the covers. I sifted it through my fingers a few times. I counted it. $9.15. It was enough. I went down and got my coat, slipped out of the house, and headed for the general store. I made my way straight back to the jewelry and notions section. I peered through the dusty glass of the showcase. It was still there. I smiled as my eyes feasted on the gold charm bracelet. Mr. Harvey would no longer allow me to feel it. He said I was going to wear all the shiny off of it. I could see her smiling as she clipped it on her dainty wrist. "Oh, Sammy, you shouldn't have." The price tag on the box still read $8.75. Mr. Harvey appeared at the showcase. "You just looking again today, or have you finally decided to buy it?" "I'm buying it, Mr. Harvey." "Well, just a minute," he said. He came back shortly with a gallon of milk in one hand and slid open the showcase window with the other. He picked up the bracelet, and I followed him to the front counter. I pulled the coins out of my pocket and piled them on the counter. "Be with you in a jiffy," Mr. Harvey said, glancing hungrily at the coins. "Just as soon as I finish filling this other order." "Will there be anything else now, Willie?" I hadn't even noticed Willie Atkins, not his real name, at the counter. He was the same age as me, but Willie was usually too busy in the evenings at odd jobs to run much with the gang. I knew his dad had died back in the summer, apparently having just enough insurance to bury him. Mrs. Atkins had 3 other children besides Willie, and in those days there was no welfare, no food stamps. Willie checked the piece of paper he held in his hand. "I guess that's all Mom has down," he said. It was mostly staples: flour, meal, sugar, a roll of bologna, bread, milk. There was also a bag of gumdrops and 5 oranges. Mr. Harvey tallied the bill at $9.05. Willie handed him the slip of paper. Mom said to give you this note." Mr. Harvey read it. His eyes darted up over the rims of his glasses. "I'm sorry, Willie," he said. "I can't put it down. Your mother is 2 months behind. I told her 2 weeks ago it would have to be cash only until the bill is paid in full." I never felt so sorry for anybody in my life as I did Willie. He looked at the grub piled on the counter, bowed his head, and walked out of the store. Mr. Harvey turned his attention back to me. "People have to learn that bills have to be paid on time. I couldn't stay in business long if I didn't collect. I've got bills to pay too." He began wrapping the bracelet. "I'll take care of you before I put all that stuff back on the shelves," he said. Quickly, I raked the money off the counter and put it back in my coat pocket. I mumbled something about changing my mind as I hurried to the door. I caught up with Willie when he was halfway home. He was pulling the little wagon he'd made from odd pieces of lumber and the wheels from a baby carriage. "Willie, it's Christmas," I said. "I've got a gift for you." Willie gave me a blank stare. "Hold out your hands," I said. He did. "Now close your eyes." He did. I dumped the coins in Willie's hands, all but a dime. "Now let's go back and get your groceries. You've got just enough." Mr. Harvey was over in the dry goods section when we walked back in. He was showing a lady some printed sheets. Willie's groceries were still on the counter. So was the bracelet. We waited until Mr. Harvey rang up the cell for the lady customer, and she left. "I've got the money now for my grub," Willie said. He pulled the coins out of his pocket and piled them on the counter. Mr. Harvey looked at the money, then at Willie, then at me, shaking his head from side to side. He counted it, $9.05. I helped Willie carry the groceries out to his wagon, then I walked over to the candy counter. "I'll have a dime's worth of them red and green gumdrops, Mr. Harvey." He lectured me as he scooped the candy into a bag. "I don't know about you, Sammy boy. You're never going to make a businessman. People will take advantage of you. Yes, sir, you'll find that they'll sure take advantage of you." Back at the counter, I paid him for the candy. Mr. Harvey picked up the box with the bracelet in it and started back toward the showcase. I headed for the door. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Harvey," I said over my shoulder, then plopped a gumdrop into my mouth. Mr. Harvey stopped. He seemed confused. Then he was headed back for the counter. He had the bracelet in his hand. "Wait a minute," he said. "Come back here a second." I came up to the counter and he handed me the bracelet. "I've had that thing back there for over a year. If somebody was going to buy it, they would have bought it by now. Go on, take it, Sammy. Give it to your girlfriend, and Merry Christmas." I almost choked on my gumdrop. What a sweet little story. Really heartwarming. Of course, it ends on a positive note, so all those wonderful feelings that you have about it. It's got some good little messages in it, though. I love, of course, the part where his brother's coming home, getting to come home from service, and surprises the mother, doesn't tell her. You know, that was just such a joyous occasion for him to get to come without telling them, and then just be surprised. I just love that picture of that. Granny tells the story. Now, they knew he was coming, but she tells a wonderful story about her brother Junior, who was in I don't know, World War II or Korea. I'm sorry that I forgot at the moment, but it was back then, and they knew that he was gonna get to come. I think it was World War II, though. He was going to get to come home, so they'd been watching for him. But she said she would always remember that they all were kind of looking out the window and gathered, and they seen him, because in those days they didn't have a car, so he had to, somebody probably gave him, he got to the train station and maybe somebody gave him a ride, or maybe they didn't, maybe he had to walk from there, but they were watching for him, so then they seen him coming, seen him walking, and about how happy they all were, and her mother had the best meal fixed for him. It was just seemed like it was the best food ever in the world, but it's because he was there. He brought them all presents, Anyway, really heartwarming story. So that kind of makes me think of that. And then, of course, the innocence of a child, Sammy. He just wanted to get that bracelet for his girlfriend, and how he'd went and looked at it and looked at it, and the gentleman there at the store said, "You're going to wear all the shine off of it." But really, he had money because he had a little job, but he just wasted all of it going to the movies and sharing with his friends and buying candy and all that. So then when it finally got time for Christmas, he knew that was just a dream. He couldn't get the little girl the bracelet. Of course, then his brother saves the day. And of course, in real life, it don't always happen like this, but I will say this always happens. Good does always win out, so that if you choose to do the right thing, which of course was to pay for Willie's groceries, that was the right thing to do. Normally, you don't immediately, like he immediately got the bracelet, what he wanted, what he had desired. Most of the time it doesn't happen like that. It may be weeks, months, years later, but it always comes back to you if you do the right thing, because good can't lose. There's always the right thing to do. The good is always the right thing to do. There's just no bad in it, so it always comes back to you. Normally not that fast, but wonderful little story there. And I feel for Mr. Harvey, because today places, country stores, even the ones here where I live, used to be able to have credit at Clay's. I don't know if you can now or not, but I understand that they can't just let people run up bills and run up bills and run up bills and never pay for it. Although you do feel really sorry for Willie's family, knowing that the father or the husband had just died that summer, and they were just struggling. And we don't know what happened to them after this, but I do think it's wonderful that at least for Christmas they had what they needed. And I'm sure that he says that's not his real name, but I'm sure the little boy that Sammy gave the money to, that was something he never forgot. And I'm positive that if he ever got on better times, he probably turned around and shared that, paid it forward, as we would say today. So, sweet little Christmas story. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I do. I hope you'll drop back by next Friday. I'm not sure if I'll read one more Christmas story or if I'll start reading our new book. So be sure to drop back by next Friday.